Did you know that Google personalizes many searches by city, and Also Asked is the only tool to access live People Also Ask data at city level? Try for free at alsoasked.com.
I was going to say that SEO with Fat Joe is as peaceful as this, but then the birds are all having fights.
Tired of SEO guesswork? Quadra's AI agent goes deeper to uncover high-impact optimizations and completes hours of SEO in minutes. Get started now.
Thank you. Wow, full room. Thank you so much. I know that I'm the only thing standing between you and a break, but we'll make it interesting. So let's start with a question. How many of you think they can confidently spot AI in the wild? No one? Okay, we got a few. Okay, great. And this is a very relevant conversation right now because we're consistently bombarded with AI stimuli. And this has sparked a lot of debate. Can you remember when ChatGPT a couple of weeks ago came out with these hyper-realistic image generation figures? And I saw posts like this cropping up. There's a lot of debate on, can we actually tell the difference? Well, if you're discerning, of course you will. But can we? We're making a lot of progress when it comes to AI. They keep on getting more and more realistic, even adding their own emotional expressions. So we're moving very fast in this area. And I've tried to answer this question myself, actually, with my own study. But somebody else did that before me. So they looked at content creation when it comes to AI and human-generated content. And they put it in front of people and asked, okay, so which one do you prefer? Whenever the source was not disclosed, people preferred the AI content. But if the source was disclosed, if they knew that it was AI content, then they preferred the human. So this is important for us to know, because if discerning AI influences the way that we respond to it, and also our attitude towards it, it has massive implication for persuasive messaging. And that's something that has actually been shown as well in a Stanford study. They put together and they compared human propaganda and AI-generated propaganda, and the AI-generated one performed pretty much as well as the human-generated propaganda across the US population. And this is scary if you think not only about the scalability of content production, but the fact that AI also enables really persuasive messages at scale that are based on very little information about the user. So let that sink in. So the study that actually caught my attention, though, a couple of years ago was this one, because while other studies have focused on the way that we process information, textual information, and we're persuaded by it, this looked at interaction with AI chatbots. And what they noticed is that the more the chatbot looked human, the more people were trusting them with their information. And also, the more they looked human and the more they thought it was competent in handling that information. Not only the human likeness was a factor, but also the gaze direction. So if the AI chatbot was looking, or the AI agent was looking at them, then they were more prone to favor them with their information, which is not new. If you attended any of my talks, you will know that I always talk about the power of face and gaze direction in directing our attention, but also creating trust. And trust is a very interesting thing. We decide to trust somebody within milliseconds of meeting them or hearing their voices. But what if the interlocutor is not real? So let's put it to the test. How many of you think that this is AI? Okay. How about this? Okay. Yeah, you're right. But what is it that tells us, well, this is definitely AI? Is it something we notice, or is it an instinct? Is there something that happens before we even know that we're making a conscious decision? So do we have a sort of embedded system, an alerting system that tells us, you shouldn't trust this is AI? Or is it a function of how much we are exposed to AI? So that's what I wanted to find out. I did my own study to figure out if our brains can tell the difference, if it's something that, for example, is instinctual. How does this compare to the way that we discriminate when we know that we're making a difference, when we're asked if something is AI or not? And also, is this modulated by how familiar we are with stimuli, by our AI fluency? And most of all, what do we do with all of that? What does this tell us about our strategies for the future? So let's get right in. The first thing that I did when I looked at answering these questions was to look at the previous literature. And I came across this study and several other studies about the uncanny valley. Have you heard about the uncanny valley? Yeah, perfect. So the uncanny valley is a term that comes from social robotics. It is a model, essentially, that's related to this feeling of, this negative feeling of uncertainty and mistrust that we place when we see something that is kind of human, but also you can tell that there's something not quite right. And this is also related to something, and it can be isolated by a physiological measure that's also a measure of psychological arousal called electrodermal activity, or in short, EDA, which is what I had a look at. So this negative feeling, this activation that we have more for the uncanny valley stimuli, or these characters that look human but are also not, comes from the feeling of uncertainty, because our brain is great at creating patterns, at responding, and very quick at making decisions. But it's also great at spotting outliers, and that's what we react to. We're exposed to a lot of human faces in our life, so the fact that we have a human that doesn't really look human kind of triggers this electrodermal activity based on the fact that it's something that doesn't match our context. So I used this to create my hypothesis. I wanted to look at AI and human-generated stimuli and look at the electrodermal activity, knowing that the AI was supposed to trigger a more active response. And the thing is, when I started this, I looked at the electrodermal activity as a measure that was used in consumer neuroscience, and I knew that it was going to give me something. It was going to give me the activation, but it doesn't tell me where that activation comes from, which is going to become important later down the slides. It doesn't tell me if it comes from a negative feeling or a positive feeling or maybe cognitive effort, so I needed to implement other data with it. So I also looked at questionnaires. The electrodermal activity, the measure that I focused on, is based on two sub-measures: the tonic component, which measures overall arousal across, for example, a longer period of time, and a phasic component, which is a skin conductance response, or something that, when we respond, for example, to very quick stimuli, something that catches our eye, or something that's particularly triggering. So, armed with all of that, I ran my first pilot here at BrightonSEO last year. So I think a few of my participants might be in the room today. I know for sure one is. So I started this, and I put a few people together. I gave them this 6 minutes video, with segments of different conditions. So there was an AI condition where I had, for example, the Morgan Freeman, the deepfake of Morgan Freeman. There was the Polar Express. Then I had a human condition where I had an actual interview with live Morgan Freeman, and I had the PNG campaign, the Thank You Man campaign. And then I had a neutral condition, so a mood induction sort of video where they were just looking at the rain falling, and then a fridge ad with no ads, with no faces, no humans, no anything. And I was expecting results to go one way or the other, at least at the beginning, but you can see that the spikes were really at different points. One spike happened for one participant at the PNG campaign, another one for the Polar Express. And when I looked at the questionnaires, actually, one big limitation came up, because I wasn't only looking, and people were not only looking at visual stimuli, they were hearing sounds, they were hearing the music and the messaging, and they were attaching their own experience and their own personal feelings to the material that they were looking at. So I knew that I had to go back, and I redid the stimuli. So I used the same conditions: mood induction, so a neutral one, human, hyper-realistic AI, and uncanny valley. You can see that I had 2 AI conditions, because I wanted to know at what point do we stop showing the higher activation for the uncanny valley. Does it modulate as a function of how human the hyper-realistic looks. So these two were created with perchance.org, and mood induction in human were taken from validated databases, so super clean. Then I ran my experiment while I was recording the activity from 2 muscles of the hand. And this is kind of the recording that I would get from one participant. So I went in and analyzed all of my data from all of the participants. And where do you think I saw the most activation, knowing what you know now? Do we have any guesses? How many for AI hyper-realistic? Okay, we've got a few. How many for human? Okay, how many for uncanny valley? That was the human. Consistently more activation for the human faces. And that's quite interesting because when I look at the statistical difference as well, they were different from both conditions, from the AI condition, but from both sub-conditions. So we react differently from human faces to human faces rather than the hyper-realistic face created with AI, especially when we look at the skin conductance level. When we look at the skin conductance response, the uncanny valley, which in previous literature was the one that triggered the most, nothing. It was the one that had the lowest, and that was also statistically significant as compared to the other conditions. The other thing that I wanted to do was, okay, we know what the preconscious response is, but how does it relate to the conscious response? So I did a reaction time test. Same faces, and then I had people pressing a button if they thought it was AI or human. And they did great with uncanny valley. They were super quick, super accurate, but they really struggled with the hyper-realistic AI, which is interesting because in 19% of the cases, it was misattributed to human, which is interesting if you think that actually this bypasses the higher activity that we have for humans. So we seem to have a higher discrimination preconsciously, but then we kind of second guess it. And then I had another question, as you remember. Does AI fluency predict this, or does it have anything to do with this? And it does, actually, but only for accuracy. It doesn't really have a relation to reaction times. Also, how does the conscious measures that we know now we have, how do these relate to the conscious activity or to the conscious discrimination? Can they predict it? And to be honest, I got too few data, I think. I got some sort of correlation trend, but it's not enough to say yes, definitely. So I will need more data to establish that. But to recap, can our brains actually tell the difference? Do we have an embedded system that tells us if something is AI? Kind of, but not in the way that I thought. In fact, we do display more activation for humans. How does this compare to over-discrimination? Well, higher electrodermal activity is related to faster and more accurate categorization, but this is just a trend. And also, does familiarity with AI have anything to do with it? Of course, but just for accuracy. However, it's worth noting that the current study, obviously, it's in a clinical sort of condition. Like, you know, I had a lab, I had electrodes, people were staying very still, they were looking at static stimuli. That's probably not the way that we experience AI in the real world, is it? And that's when I realized something. The answer was all along in the pilot, because that's a much better representation of how we experience AI in the real world. We are more likely to experience it when we're doing something or when we're already, being exposed to a message or something. In all of its limitation, it told me what everything is about, really. It showed the emotional component taking over the recognition. So this participant, can you remember, they reacted more for the P&G campaign, and not for the reason that I thought. They reacted to it because they hated the brand. Not the message, they hated the brand. So that's the reason why I say the previous experiences matter a lot. Second one, reacted to the uncanny valley because the Polar Express was something that they used to watch as kids with their family. You cannot detach the personal element from the experience. You cannot detach the human from the entire of it. So whether they discriminate or not, that's going to be your message. And I came across this tweet and I thought, well, this really relates to what I'm thinking now. What happens when we're not able to discriminate anymore, when the AI gets so good that even this embedded system, let's say, doesn't tell us anything new? Well, what it tells me is that even if now we do react to something that's more human, we don't know how long it is lasting for, because maybe in the near future we're so exposed to AI that these will become our new normal. And that's actually a good thing if you think about it, because our brain, again, responds to patterns and spots outliers, but it's also great at adapting. It's got this superpower called neuroplasticity, which is when it reconnects as a function of experience and learning. And this is great for us because the progressive exposure to AI will eventually modulate how we feel about it and how much we trust it. Which tells me that as we get more exposed to AI, the more personal experience and the more memories we will build with it. And this will blur the lines between perceived trustworthiness and will become irrelevant, essentially, even when the automatic discrimination remains the same. So I came to this study wanting to demonstrate one thing, really. Because everyone was saying, well, we're not going to be marketers anymore, our jobs will be taken. I was like, no, I'm going to demonstrate that the human element will still win. Well, my motivations changed. Because the more I looked into it, the more I was like, well, if we can't discriminate, sure, then we will say that the human element will win. But what if we can't discriminate? We don't have anything in place to protect us. There's no day that I don't get asked, can you do that with AI? Especially now that there's tools like that can create content at scale, even emotional content at scale. Sure, I can do it, but should we? It depends. Of course it does. I'm not here to demonize AI. I think AI has got a lot of potential, and this is an example of where it does some good. Natalia was listening to the SEO Pattern podcast, and she noticed that the female voice was the one that had the expert voice, and she was never interrupted. She was actually encouraged to speak, which is what she reacted to with surprise. She wasn't expecting that. So, in all of its limitations, AI has actually got the potential to reduce gender bias or to counteract gender bias. But it also has some misuse. Somebody got scammed out of an AI Brad Pitt. And you can argue that, okay, maybe she didn't recognize that it was an AI, but even if she did, she had an emotional connection with this person. So that's the reason why persuasion got more in the way. But there's also the ugly. AI therapist, or ChatGPT, has performed pretty much the same, or even better, than human therapists in a study. And that's bad when you think that there is examples like that, when it comes out with suggestions like that, please die. Because an actual therapist will be radiated from the order, right? It will not be able to work anymore. But what consequences does Gemini have? So what can we do, and what are our rights currently, and our responsibilities when it comes to AI? So obviously we're not in the EU here, but we do have something in the EU, which is the EU AI Act. It's very difficult to say all in one, but it introduces some levels of risks and essentially the regulation that applies to them. And most of marketing actually is between the minimal risks and limited risks. So essentially no regulations. Also, it's not fully enforced yet. What do we have in the UK? Nothing. We got a pro-innovation framework, great, based on 5 principles. So safety and security, transparency, fairness, accountability, contestability. But again, every department, every sector can do it as they will. What really pissed me off here is that when I read this sentence, I was like, this is what's wrong with our industry as well. Look at the negative connotation that's given to the legislative names. New, rigid, and onerous legislative requirements on businesses could hold back AI innovation. So it's all based on how much progress we can do with AI, with no regards to, do we need to be protected? There is a bill now that has been pushed forward, but I don't think it will pass. But essentially, it advocates for the creation of an AI authority, are regulatory principles and public engagement for the regulation of AI, which is what we need, because look at that. Somebody came across my Instagram, and that's an influencer that I follow, but she wasn't actually advertising this product. Somebody created an AI fake Ariel and made ads with it. She reached out to Meta, got blocked. So that's, if you ask me, that's where we need regulations. Like, marketing does not sit in the minimal risks or no risks, right? So in the end, do we have an edge on AI? We do. Preliminary results, at least, say that we do. For now. I don't know how much it will last. Takeaways for you. Where does it leave us in this mission for us marketers to leverage AI? Well, we can still leverage AI to, enable processes that are more efficient, but carefully balance as well. How much could we do with it? Like, we don't want to miss out on the opportunity to connect with a user or even to be ethical. And the attention to our existing audience will become paramount, because their expectations and what they know about us will determine their attitudes towards us, whether we do or not use AI. Also, we will still be able to leverage AI to create engagement and to create those emotional experiences that get new people in. And the new challenge will be figuring out how to do it with AI, not despite AI. Last but not least, we need more enforceable rules. AI might have enhanced content production and scalability, but it also enables malpractice at scale. I'm not saying that AI is the enemy, far from it, but I think its potential can be blinding. And I think that businesses are much scared to miss out on the opportunity curve and the innovation curve, and they don't really regulate anything. So adoption of AI is moving faster, much faster than our understanding of how it impacts us and of the regulations, of course. So maybe with some of the time that we save by automating all of these processes with AI, we can use to create forums to discuss how do we regulate this, how do we enforce an ethical use of AI so that it doesn't actually damage anyone. So to conclude, what do I see in my crystal ball for the future? Maybe it's wishful thinking, but I'm hoping less prompt engineers and more AI governance architects. So this was me. If you want to connect, these are my socials. Thank you so much for listening.